Hi everyone, I'm Stephanie Panay, and in today's podcast we'll be talking about spiritual cleansing from the point of view of A Course in Miracles. I'll be reading from an essay I wrote called Cleaning the Mirror, which is taken from Volume 1 of Reflections on A Course in Miracles. I think the term spiritual cleansing is a great way of describing what is at the heart of the curriculum of A Course in Miracles, its healing process. It really is about cleansing our mind of all the erroneous thoughts about ourselves and about other people and about the world and God. But let's start with the essay itself, Cleaning the Mirror. A Course in Miracles is a course in recognition. Firstly, we learn to recognise the kind of thoughts that are part of the ego thought system. Then we are taught how to let go of them through forgiveness, enabling us to recognise our self, capital S, our true identity, and this brings us peace. Recognition of what hurts us, followed by its removal. That's the Course's recipe for healing. Here's a quote from the Course. What is healing but the removal of all that stands in the way of knowledge? And how else can one dispel illusions except by looking at them directly, without protecting them? End of quote. So, while the Course leads us towards love, its curriculum focuses on helping us recognise all that is not love. Quote, that is the interference. That is what needs to be undone. End of quote. Subtitle, What Love Is Not. The Course says that there are two emotions, or rather, two motivations for all of our actions, love and fear. It also says that frightened people can be vicious. Fear breeds attack, yet the forms attack can take aren't always obvious. Some even come with a smile and the best of intentions. Indeed, the Course makes it clear that we don't realise all the forms in which we attack others and ourselves. Quote, is it not true you do not recognise some of the forms attacks can take? If it is true attack in any form will hurt you, and will do so just as much as in any other form that you do recognise, then it must follow that you do not always recognise the source of pain. Attack in any form is equally destructive. End of quote. Attacking others will hurt us because it will feed our guilt. So while we can't always recognise when we are attacking, we can at least recognise the signs. Quote, there is a stab of pain, a twinge of guilt, and above all, a loss of peace. End of quote. A lack of peace is therefore one sign that we have chosen to attack, and choosing to value any aspect of the ego thought system is itself an attack on love, an assault on truth, to quote the Course, and will feel guilty and agitated because of it. Workbook Lesson 133, I Will Not Value What Is Valueless, provides a guide for distinguishing between what is valueless and what is valuable. Quote, today we list the real criteria by which to test all the things you think you want. Unless they meet these sound requirements, they are not worth desiring at all, for they can but replace what offers more. It is wise to learn the laws you set in motion when you choose and what alternatives you choose between. End of quote. If we don't realise how to distinguish between what is valuable and valueless, we won't know when we are choosing sorrow over happiness or attack over love. And these are the only alternatives we ever choose between. Quote, we have already stressed there are but two alternatives, however many there appear to be. Each choice you make brings everything to you or nothing. Therefore, if you learn the tests by which you can distinguish everything from nothing, you will make the better choice. End of quote. And that was also taken from Lesson 133. Subtitle, All That Glitters, Distinguishing the Valuable from the Valueless. The workbook lesson gives 4 criteria for what is valuable. Criteria 1, it must be eternal. Basically, anything outside of ourselves, including our own body, doesn't last. The world is a place of change, where people and things come and go, and as the Stoic philosopher Seneca said, fortune gives us nothing we can truly own. To seek for something outside of ourselves as the be-all and end-all, the answer to all our problems, is to set ourselves up for pain. Quote, "Seek not outside yourself, for it will fail, and you will weep each time an idol falls. For all your pain comes simply from a futile search for what you want, insisting where it must be found. No one who comes here but must still have hope, some lingering illusion, or some dream that there is something outside of himself that will bring happiness and peace to him. If everything is in him, this cannot be so. Seek not outside yourself. The search implies you are not whole within and fear to look upon your devastation, but prefer to seek outside yourself for what you are." End of quote. In contrast, our spiritual self shares the timelessness of heaven, and the daily practice of forgiveness is how we come to identify with its wholeness, something that the ego tries to prevent by insisting that happiness can be found outside, in something we can consume or possess. Quote, "All idols of this world were made to keep the truth within from being known to you, and to maintain allegiance to the dream that you must find what is outside yourself to be complete and happy." End of quote. The ego is all about getting, whereas our right-minded self simply is. The problem is we don't know the difference between pain and joy. We think joy is having our specialness needs filled, in feeling superior to others, for example, or desirable, or vindicated. Having our emotional needs filled feels great for a moment, but it creates a dependency, and one that can't be counted on. Does fame or status last forever? Do you have it everywhere and with everyone? Can it be lost? What is it vulnerable to? What about your looks or your health? The Course isn't suggesting that we should deny ourselves worldly things that appeal to us, but that worldly things in and of themselves won't make us happy, and to believe that they can is to identify with littleness. Quote, "You do not ask too much of life, but far too little. When you let your mind be drawn to bodily concerns, to things you buy, to eminence as valued in the world, you ask for sorrow, not for happiness. This Course does not attempt to take from you the little that you have." End of quote. When we choose for things of the world above all else, we cut ourselves off from what we already have, the only gift that can satisfy, a gift we recognise through practicing forgiveness. Quote, "What could you want forgiveness cannot give? Do you want peace? Forgiveness offers it. Do you want happiness, a quiet mind, a certainty of purpose, and a sense of worth and beauty that transcends the world? Do you want care and safety and the warmth of sure protection always? Do you want a quietness that cannot be disturbed, a gentleness that never can be hurt, a deep abiding comfort, and a rest so perfect it can never be upset?" End of quote. That was taken from Workbook Lesson 122. We are assured that forgiveness offers us all of this. The problem is we don't yet believe that a quiet mind and transcendent sense of worth and beauty will satisfy us more than getting a new car, a bigger house, an award, or more followers on insert your preferred social media platform. Quote from the Course, "Obey the Holy Spirit and you will be giving up the ego, but you will be sacrificing nothing. On the contrary, you will be gaining everything. If you believed this, there would be no conflict." End of quote. Now we come to the second of 4 criteria that Lesson 133 gives to help us discern what is valuable from what is valueless. So the first criteria that we've just been through was it must be eternal. The second criteria is it must be something that is shared. The ego thought system, founded on a belief in separation, is all about separate interests, one or the other, winners and losers. The ego thrives on making comparisons, who has more, who has less, and comparisons ultimately lead to judgments of better and worse, inferior and superior. Sameness is the enemy of the ego. In fact, the ego has no concept of it. Here's a quote from the Course. "It," meaning the world's perception, "rests on differences, on uneven background and shifting foreground, on unequal heights and diverse sizes, on varying degrees of darkness and light, and thousands of contrasts in which each thing seen competes with every other in order to be recognised. A larger object overshadows a smaller one. A brighter thing draws the attention from another with less intensity of appeal. What the body's eyes behold is only conflict. Look not to them for peace and understanding. Illusions are always illusions of differences. End of quote. Through the body's eyes, we see a world of differences, and these differences mean something important to us. Through the Holy Spirit's vision, we are able to recognise the sameness beyond the differences in form. And that is what matters most. That is what we value. And the sameness would be the same fears and the same need to return home. This is how we shift from identifying with the body to the spiritual self that is beyond it. We recognise our sameness. We are all worthy. We are all perfect. Not some of us, but all of us. A helpful exercise is to go about your day noticing all of the ways in which you habitually emphasise and judge differences, making them into a big deal. If we believe we have something special that someone else doesn't, knowledge, money, status, and education, we have again placed value on the valueless. In any interaction, what we give or take on the level of form is secondary. What is primary is our purpose, either to focus on what we are giving on the level of form and to therefore feel that we need something given to us in return, or to remember our shared interests, our sameness, and in doing so, answer our shared need. The only thing that gives anything in the world value is the purpose for which it is used, and it can either be used by our right mind or our wrong mind, for healing or attack respectively. What is valuable then entails no loss to anyone. And that brings us to the third criteria. The third criteria for discerning something valuable from something valueless is that it doesn't serve the ego's secret goal of perpetuating our individuality or guilt. The ego feeds on guilt and is sustained by it. It will therefore do whatever it can to get us to do or perceive something so as to increase our guilt, but never let this secret goal be obvious to us. Indeed, it will do what it can to convince us that our goal is worthy, harmless, and desirable. A classic example is the idea that it's okay to focus on making money because you will be able to do all sorts of good, charitable, loving things with it when you have it in excess. The ideal seems harmless enough, some would say even commendable, but at its core is the telltale ego refrain, if only. An if only orientation, for example, if only I had more money, if only he or she were kinder, if only my work was recognised, if only I could live in the south of France. These statements are statements of dependency. They say that we can't be happy until sometime in the future when A, B or C happens, and it places our state of mind, our peace, at the mercy of outside forces, many of which are beyond our control. And it is this idea that we can't be happy now that binds us to our ego. When we identify with our spiritual self, however, we will be content because our self embodies the knowledge that we already have everything because we are everything. So, while our worldly aspirations might excite us, they will also cause us pain because they speak to a belief in our deficiency. Pretty soon, we will find ourselves making compromises based on fears associated with our experience of lack. Perhaps not being totally honest with others, for example, in order to get ahead. It's this spiral downwards in our integrity, trying to gain at someone else's expense, that reveals the ego's secret goal to increase our guilt. It's also this secret goal of guilt that makes us value what can't be shared and what isn't eternal. That's the end of that particular point, but I find it very interesting, this idea that the ego's secret goal, well, the ego lives on guilt. It is made from a thought of guilt. So its secret goal in trying to convince us to do anything is to increase our guilt, but it will mask it. It's the secret goal. So it will mask it in ways that feeds really our specialness, our need to feel secure, actually, a good person, a good enough person, a worthy person. It appeals to those insecurities in us. So it's not nice. It's not our friend. It's using those insecurities to align us with itself. But it coats its intentions in ways that make us think that what we are aiming for is a good thing. It actually reminds me of the story of Jesus' temptation in the desert, where the devil says, I have connections to kings and everything, and I have worldly connections, and I know how to give you worldly power, because then if you have that, then people will listen to you. But who's going to listen to you now? You're just the son of a carpenter and you have no money, you have no status. Who's going to listen to you? If you really want your word to be heard, it will be heard by a lot more people if you have a bit of worldly power behind you. I can give that to you. So come along with me and let me give you this worldly power, and then you can say what you want and you'll have more influence. Well, I love the response in John Milton's Paradise Regained poem, where he kind of retells this whole story of Jesus' time in the wilderness. I love the response that Jesus gives. So I'd just like to read a quote from another essay I wrote called Burning Down the House. It's from a book called The Bridge of Return, and it discusses John Milton's work, Paradise Regained, and this time of Jesus in the desert. And here's a quote from that book. Satan decides to divert Jesus from his purpose by enhancing the allure of worldly things. He tempts Jesus with money, but in a roundabout way, telling him that while his heart appears to have high designs, he doesn't have all that he needs to achieve high action. He's unknown, has no networks or friends in high places. His father is a carpenter. He was brought up in poverty, and here he is alone in the desert. Satan says, money brings honour, friends, conquest, and realms. Therefore, if at great things thou wouldst arrive, get riches first, get wealth, and treasure heap. Satan offers to give Jesus wealth, saying that money can give him the power and influence he needs to do great things, whereas virtue, valour, and wisdom will leave him high and dry. Jesus doesn't budge. He says, yet wealth without these three is impotent. Jesus goes on to say he doesn't want to rule like a king who rules over bodies yet can't govern his own passions. The godly person, he says, has influence by allowing his soul to govern him, thereby attracting the souls of others. Okay, let's get back to cleaning the mirror. So now we are up to the fourth criteria for distinguishing the valuable from the valueless. Finally, if there is any guilt about what we have chosen, then we know we are looking at things through the ego's eyes, regardless of whether our choice has been right-minded or not. Even if we had chosen with our right minds, the ego will want us to feel guilty and have us question whether or not we had done the right thing. If we had chosen with our wrong minds and can see this, it will want to rub our nose in our mistake, increasing our identification with guilt. This focus on what we have chosen to do or not do, think or not think, keeps us in the past, obscuring what the Course calls the obvious, that right now, if we're not feeling peaceful, it's because we've chosen the ego as our interpreter. Even if we realise that we have operated from a one or the other mindset in the past, the Holy Spirit will never have us feel guilty now. Remorse would be a more appropriate response to a mistake we made out of fear and would enable us to move on. Reinforcing guilt, however, would ensure that we fall into the same mistake again because it reinforces everything else about the ego thought system: fear, loneliness, deprivation, vulnerability, unworthiness, and the sense of desperation that leads to the one or the other or competitive mentality. This final point is about how we are feeling right now. And if we are not at peace right now, It is because we have chosen to interpret anything and everything with our ego. So even if we made a choice between A and B out there in the world, even if that was we did that with our right mind, if we're not feeling peaceful right here, right now, it is because we are interpreting that choice that we made with our ego. So if we made it with the Holy Spirit, the choice between A and B, it'll have us questioning that. If we did make the choice between A and B with our ego, it'll have us judging ourselves for that. So the ego just always wants us to feel guilty right now. And so it doesn't matter whether we do things with love or we do things through fear and attack. The ego doesn't care. It just says, right here, right now, I want you to feel guilty no matter what you do. So if you are feeling guilty right now, that is also showing that you have chosen the valueless. You have chosen to listen to the ego. So now we come to a summary of this section. In summary, A Course in Miracles helps us recognise the real alternatives for choice that lie before us in any circumstance, at any time. It is the choice for the valuable or valueless, happiness or sorrow, everything or nothing. Whenever there seems to be a number of choices available to us on the level of form, we're asked to notice where we are placing primary value. Do we believe our happiness depends on getting or avoiding something in particular? If so, we can be sure we are looking at the situation through the ego's eyes, but we can choose again. Quote, "You always choose between your weakness and the strength of Christ in you, and what you choose is what you think is real. Simply by never using weakness to direct your actions, you have given it no power, and the light of Christ in you is given charge of everything you do. In every difficulty, all distress, and each perplexity, Christ calls to you and gently says, 'My brother, choose again.'" End of quote. Now let's bring this whole discussion back to the idea of spiritual cleansing. Being able to discern between the valuable and the valueless is helpful because it lets us know when we are coming from our ego. And it's at that moment that we need spiritual cleansing. But we can also find that there are particular issues in our lives or particular choices which we always find we habitually err on the side of being impulsive or very conservative because we've either made something hugely desirable and we really want to get it, that's that impulsive nature. That shows we've made it too big a deal. But so does the other. If we really shy away from it and keep tending towards the conservative option, that's not peaceful either because there's some fear involved in that. The other is fear as well, but it doesn't seem like it. So what the Course then offers us is a way out of our pattern based on fear. Because left to our own devices, we will stay in those patterns regardless of what we do. So the person who impulsively goes forward and chooses something, they'll keep that impulsive nature and tendency. Nothing will ever satisfy. They'll just keep impulsively choosing more and more and more in different things. The other person, the ultra-conservative, will keep shying back from things. So both need correction. Both are showing some kind of attachment to an extreme position. Both are coming from fear. And so both showing the signs of a wound. And how I'd like to express this idea of the wounding related to both the extremes is to read out the back blurb from my book, Above the Battleground, which uses the idea of opposites and coming to a balanced position. That's a major theme throughout this book. So this is what it has to say on the back. Icarus flew too close to the sun, but what else could he do? Young and inexperienced, he found it difficult to stay a middle course. Intoxicated with his newfound power, he soared upwards, meeting an untimely end. But things might have gone the other way. Icarus could have feared his burgeoning capacity for flight, hesitating to use his wings. Descending too close to the ocean, the outcome would be equally disastrous. Icarus's challenge represents our own. Emotionally, we experience similar conflicting pulls. Sometimes we lack confidence, feel weighed down, overwhelmed, and fear what lies ahead. At other times, we feel the pull of the sun. We impulsively fly into action, driven to achieve something great. The former leads to bypassing our potential, the latter to messing it up. So the story of Icarus is that he and his father, Daedalus, were trapped within a maze where the Minotaur lay. And in order to escape the maze so that the Minotaur wouldn't come and kill them and perhaps devour them, they fashioned a pair of wings out of some twigs and feathers. Well, really, Daedalus did this, the father. Icarus was the son. And he put the wings on Icarus and himself, and they went flying up and out of the maze. And Daedalus said to Icarus, "Now stay close to me, follow me, because if you fly too close to the sun, you'll get burnt. If you fly too close to the ocean, the dampness of the ocean spray will get on the wings and they'll become heavy and you'll end up drowning in the ocean. So follow me, follow the middle path." So off they go into the sky, but Icarus gets a taste of freedom and power with these wings, and he starts to play around a bit and he starts to scoot up a little bit, and then he becomes intoxicated with his ability to fly and to fly high, and off he goes up towards the sun. He gets too close to the sun melts the wax that's holding his wings together, and down he plummets to his death. So you could say that the person who is ultra-conservative at some time in their past has been burnt, has gone too close to the sun before, and now they're going to be ultra-conservative. The person who flew too close to the water and that real depressing, weighty effect and just escaped that kind of depression, if you like, heaviness by the skin of their teeth. They thought, I'm not going back there again. I don't want anything to do with those sorrowful emotions, that depression. And so their tendency is to cling to the other, to impulsively go towards the shiny, sparkly things of the world, to keep them away from that dark stuff. So these are the woundings behind the opposites. These are some examples of woundings. Well, the Course helps us notice when we're coming from that wound. It says, hang on a minute. Are you making too big a deal about something that is valueless? Is it timeless? Can it be shared with everybody? And also, by you sticking to your stance and either really wanting to get it or wanting to avoid it, is that making you feel a little bit guilty? Is that going to increase your guilt? If we are starting to answer yes to these questions, the Course is saying you're valuing something that is valueless. There's something that needs to be healed here. You need to ask for help to heal whatever is behind you making this thing in the world too big a deal. Through the process of forgiveness, we can come to that middle path. We can start to follow Daedalus, the father in the story, again, in the Greek myth. That is really the only safety in the world, is to heal and listen to the Holy Spirit. Because by doing things from love and with the Holy Spirit's perspective, we're not hurting ourselves. Every other way is only dangerous to us because we're hurting ourselves, because we're rooting our identification within the ego thought system. And that thought system is full of fear and self-destruction and self-destructive urges, because it needs us, the ego needs us to feel suffering and pain, because that experience says, in the ego's interpretation, heaven is destroyed and you are not holy and you are not whole, because look at all the awful things you are experiencing that you feel. How can you be a whole, complete being when you feel so vulnerable, when you feel so desperate? The other thing about being stuck in an opposite, in a habitual extreme position, is that every now and then there'll be a little eruption of the opposite that we've been containing, and it won't work out for us. So let's say we're uber conservative, and then every now and then a little eruption of impulsiveness will come out, and we'll buy, I will splurge and I'll buy this, that and the other, and they won't be any good for us. And likewise the opposite. We might be the impulsive, always heading towards impulsive buying or whatever to deal with keeping our wound at bay or any of those dark, heavy feelings coming along. And so that's our strategy. And then all of a sudden there erupts a little thing of conservativeness, uber conservativeness, when it really would have been beneficial for us to go ahead and say yes to something instead of no. And that doesn't serve us either. So we're conservative when we shouldn't be really, and we're impulsive when we shouldn't be on the other side. So we're really just working against ourselves. The Course offers us a way to rise above these inner conflicts between opposites, between opposite positions, between extremes. And that is its process of forgiveness. It's because of the defensive mechanism of projection that we can become aware of the opposite that we are keeping quashed within us, in our shadow. We judge the impulsive decision-making and choices of others harshly. That's because we are stifling our decision-making capacity within. We judge the habitual conservativeness of others harshly. That is because we are stifling our own capacity to be conservative. Why do we do this? Why are those capacities now part of our shadow? Because they are linked to that wound. And always the wound, whether it was that we flew too close to the sun, were too impulsive in the past, or we flew too close to the water, some heavy feelings and dark feelings are just too scary to go near, there will be people associated with those wounds that we need to forgive. And the Course provides that process of forgiveness to help us do that. That brings me to the end of this podcast. I hope it's been of help to you, and tune in again. Thank you. Bye.